welcome back to Katie's Favorite Recipes. Today I'm going to be showing you all how to make this white chocolate Halloween fudge, these little witch hat cookies, and then we're also going to make some caramel apples. These are all three super easy and they are delicious. So let's go ahead and get started now. Starting off with the white chocolate fudge, these are the ingredients I'm using. You can check the description for the typed out version. I've also got my 8x8 lined with parchment paper. You really need to line it so it will make it easier when it's set to pull it out and get it cut. But I'm going to start off measuring my white bacon chips. So I got the Walmart brand of these and I measured mine out because I need about 3 cups and this says about 2 cups in each bag. I knew that I needed about 3 cups of this to about 3.5, so I went ahead and measured it out just to see exactly how much I was working with here. That way I could give you all exact measurements, and this came out to be just right at about 3 cups of white chocolate chips, which was fine. That way in case you use a different brand or whatever, you'll know the measurements. But we're going to go ahead and throw these into a microwave safe bowl. You want to make sure that it's big enough that when these melt down, it won't overflow when you go to stir it. But you also want it to be microwave safe. So we're going to throw in 1 can of sweetened condensed milk as well. And we are going to start microwaving this at about 30-second intervals. I've done my first 30-second interval and I'm going to start stirring it to see how it's melting down and everything, to see if it needs more time or if it's good. Mine needed more time, so I stirred it up and seen that it was still grainy looking, and I decided that I was going to put it back in for another 30 seconds and stir it up, and it started stirring up pretty good, so I thought, it was probably about done. I went ahead and put in my 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, and then I started stirring that in, but it just had this grainy look about it that wasn't going away. So I just kept stirring it thinking that this would mix up and that the graininess would go away after I kept stirring it. But then I realized that it needed to be melted more. It wasn't melted enough to where it could all blend really well. So I microwaved it again for about another 30 seconds, took it out, and I stirred it up some more, and it started getting that really silky smooth look about it with that glossy sheen, and everything you could tell was just melted really well and creamy. You could tell that everything was blended together like it needed to be. So once we finished that up and got it to the texture that we needed, we went ahead and took it over and poured it into our lined parchment baking pan. You want your parchment paper to be slacked over the edges and everything. That way when you pour this into it, it has slack to be able to take form of the pan still, because if there's not slack and you pour this in and one side doesn't be able to form and it's pulled tight, it's not going to be as thick as the other sides of the pieces. And then the creases and folds and things, it will take shapes of that. So you want to make sure that it can spread out still evenly. That way when you cut it, all the squares will be uniform in size for the most part on how thick they are and things like that. But we're going to go ahead and pour this in there, and then once we finish that and we get the top smoothed out the way we want it, we're going to start adding our Halloween candy and sprinkles and things like that. I'm going to start off adding in handfuls of candy corn. I just got 1 bag of this and I did not use the whole bag, but I'm just going to layer them and put them in there evenly. And then I'm going to move on and start adding my sprinkles to this as well. I got this little sprinkle jar and it's got several different kinds of sprinkles in it that are Halloween color themed and also fall. It has little pumpkins, little things like that, little ghosts. It's got just regular purple and black and orange sprinkles. It's got sand and sugar sprinkles. But feel free to change this up and make it your own. Use whatever kind of sprinkles you want, whatever candy. You could do Reese's Pieces, M&Ms. You could use food coloring and change the color of this fudge in order to be green or purple. I've also got this Monster Lab sprinkle mix, and I'm going to go ahead and pour that in there. After I get my candy corn and my sprinkles the way I want them, I'm going to take a fork and just lightly tap over the top of this just to get all of my sprinkles and candy corn lightly pushed into the top of this. And then we're going to let this set on the counter and cool at room temperature for about 2 to 2.5 hours. As you can see, when I start cutting into the middle of mine, it is still just slightly gooey, but it's really not a big deal. But if I had have gave it an extra 30 minutes, it probably would have been a lot firmer and easier to cut in the middle. When you go to cut this, if you use candy corn in it, just work around the candy corn, because if you try to cut through it, it's just going to mash it down into the fudge and it is not going to really cut very well. It's just going to kind of distort the shape of the fudge pieces. If that does happen though, you can always fluff these back up into squares, and you can take something and just kind of push the sides in and fluff it a little bit and form it back into a little square, but it's really not a big deal. I'm just going to keep working with mine though and cutting it up to the sizes I want. I did not cut mine in all uniform sizes. I just cut them down to bigger pieces and smaller pieces. It was nice having a variety of different sizes of the fudge because some people want smaller pieces whereas some people might want a bigger piece, but this fudge was so easy to make and it was amazing. We absolutely loved it. I am definitely going to be making this again. This was probably my very favorite out of the 3 recipes that I'm showing you all in this video. It was so quick, so easy, and tasted amazing. And you can always change this up and change the flavor of the fudge if you want to do that, but I hope you all enjoy. Next, we're going to be making witch hat cookies. There is no baking or melting involved with these. You just take some fudge stripe cookies, some Hershey Kisses, some icing, and some sprinkles. And we're just going to put these together. I'm just going to lay out some cookies here to get them ready to start icing. So we're going to flip them upside down. And I've got this cookie icing here. I did orange. You can do whatever color you want, or you can get multiple colors. And we're just going to start unwrapping these Hershey Kisses and setting them directly on the center hole. If you try to ice them without the Hershey Kisses on it, the icing a lot of times will go down through the center hole, so that's why I put my Hershey Kiss on it first. When I first started making these, I started icing just around the Hershey Kiss and just leaving the top of the hat brown. But then I ended up doing something different, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But starting off, I'm going to go ahead and go around this Hershey Kiss. And then once we get it around the kiss, we're going to add some sprinkles. These sprinkles are going to stick to this icing, and when it dries, they're going to be stuck to it, but I'm going to shake off the excess, and that's what I had so far. Now, here's where I change what I do. I'm sitting here trying to ice this cookie, and my bag explodes, and I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do now? Because I don't have the tip. You know, I could move it to a Ziploc bag and cut the bottom corner off of it, or I could just try to ice it to where none of the cookie is showing and it's just simply iced over the bottom of it. And I ended up doing that, and I really actually liked it a lot better the way it turned out that way. So I'm glad the bag busted, because if it hadn't have, I probably wouldn't have done it that way. I probably would have just done a ring around the Hershey Kiss. And the bottom of these cookies are not perfectly covered in chocolate, so there was like dips and missing pieces, and I wasn't as happy the way they were turning out. So after this happened and I done it this way, I was really happy with how they looked. I think these turned out really cute. My kids were super excited about them. They thought they were really neat, and it was just a cute little way to get excited about Halloween and trick-or-treat and all that coming up. So anyways, I just did different sprinkles on different witch hat cookies, and this was super simple. It didn't take long, and we all loved them. They tasted really good. So if you do end up making these, you can decide if you just want to ice around the Hershey Kiss and make a little ring, or if you want to ice the whole cookie. But I think my favorite was the whole cookie iced. I think these turned out really cute, and they were a lot of fun. Lastly, I'm making some caramel apples. So I've got my sprinkles here that I'm using, and then I've got my Granny Smith apples. I'm just going to wash those really good, make sure they're clean, and then I'm going to dry them really well, make sure they're totally dry, and then break all of the stems off of them. You want to make sure you try to get the stem that's down in there as well, not just breaking off the very top and snapping the stem in half, but getting it off that's kind of down in the apple too as well. And then we're going to take our treat sticks or popsicle sticks or whatever you have, and we are going to skewer these apples. You want to stick it down straight in there as you can get it. Try not to let it go sideways and poke out of the side of the apple, or push it all the way down through where it comes out the bottom. That way it will set flat. But if you had a little hammer or something like that, it might make it easier to tap these down in there. But once we get all of that done, we're going to start melting our caramels. So I've got these caramel squares, and I'm going to unwrap them. Once we get them all unwrapped, we're going to start putting them into a microwave safe dish or measuring cup, a bigger measuring cup, not one of the smaller ones. That way that, you know, we can just stick it in there, microwave it, and stir it up. You want to start, honestly, with probably 2 tablespoons of milk. I did 3, and I feel like it was just a tad bit too runny. So if you're using the whole bag, I would recommend doing 2 tablespoons instead of 3, and we're just going to start microwaving that at 15 to 30 second intervals and stirring it in between. We want it to get all the way melted and completely smooth. We want to have like a really good, smooth, creamy texture. And if you get your caramel too runny, what's going to happen is this caramel is going to slowly run off of your apples even when it's set up. So that's why I would say to do 2 tablespoons instead of 3. But we're just going to mix this up really well and keep mixing it until everything is lump free. Once we get it that way, we're going to start dipping our caramel apples into this. You can use a fork, a whisk, or whatever you want and just stir it up really well. I also have a cookie sheet that I have lined with parchment paper and sprayed with some kind of non-stick spray, and then I stuck mine in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes to an hour before I done this to let it get good and cold. That way when we set these apples on here, it won't just start melting off on the bottom. It'll keep it cool. And here's a really good picture of my sprinkles that I'm using for these little treats, but I've also got some candy corn here, and I'm going to start dipping my apples into this and slowly pulling them out straight. If you have a measuring cup that's kind of narrow like this, if you barely hit the side, it's going to rake that caramel right off. So slowly lift this apple out of that caramel straight as you can, and then you can take the edge or rim of your cup, your bowl, whatever, and very gently scrape the bottom of this and make sure that no excess caramel is hanging off underneath. You can also roll and turn your apple to make sure that all of the excess caramel is rolling off and going across it smoothly. That way there won't be any big lumps or pieces like that, but just scrape the bottom gently, set it on your parchment paper. And if you want to start moving these to the refrigerator as you work, you can do that to make sure that they don't start running off and melting a little bit. But just try to put these down in the caramel and get the tops covered as much as you can. One thing I realized is that it was easier to get those sprinkles to stick when the caramel was tackier and starting to set up just a little bit, because the weight of these sprinkles, some of them can just slide that caramel down off of the apple because it's kind of heavy. So you want it to be a little bit tacky and set up. So you can set it in the refrigerator for just maybe like 15-20 minutes, let it start setting up, but don't let it get so hard that nothing's going to stick to it. For me, it was easier to sprinkle the sprinkles onto my apples instead of rolling it in there, like out of a bowl or with a spoon or something like that, and just dropping them on there and rolling the apple in the air as I did it, because if I rolled it in the bowl, it's like it would smear the caramel off of it. So I just took some candy corn and made a little face on this one. I used different colored sprinkles for these. I did the pack that I showed you, and I also used the pack that I showed you earlier that had the eyes and the fingers and stuff like that in it, and I used that to make a little face on this guy. And then I also used the other sprinkles in the pack that had like 5 different kinds and gave him hair. I just decorated these how I wanted, and I just used Halloween and fall themed sprinkles and just did different things on different ones, and they were a lot of fun. The kids enjoyed them. I think that, that's the main thing. But my husband helped me hold these apples and turn them slowly as I sprinkled the sprinkles around the tops and stuff, since I wasn't rolling them and I was having a hard time to get them to stick. So he held them for me, and I just shook the sprinkles on there and took a spoon and lightly patted the sprinkles into the caramel. That helped the sprinkles hold better because some of them just kept falling off. And if you can tell on this apple, I was doing it before it got cold enough and it started running off the bottom of it a little bit. So just give it a little bit of time to set up and get kind of chilled in the refrigerator, but not, like I said, so hard that it don't stick. Once I finish that up and get them the way I want them, these are ready to set in the refrigerator and let them set up all the way. So you can just leave them in there for a few hours and let them chill and harden up really good. So that way when you take them out, that the caramel won't just run off the bottoms of them. But I hope you all enjoy these videos, and make sure to like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.